I discovered my elderly parents trembling outside my home while my in-laws hosted a lavish party inside as if they owned it. My father murmured, "Son, why are we not allowed in?" What I did after that destroyed their world completely. I thought I had everything figured out at 34. A stable job, a modest home, and a wife I truly believed I could trust. But if you had told me just a year ago that I'd find my elderly parents shivering outside my own house, while my in-laws partied inside like they owned the place, I would have laughed in your face. But that night, I didn't laugh. I froze. And in that gut-wrenching moment, everything I thought I knew about love, respect, and family shattered into a million pieces. See, I grew up in a small town, raised by two of the kindest, most selfless people you could ever meet. My dad, Harold, was a mechanic for nearly 40 years. My mom, Linda, ran a tiny bakery that barely kept the lights on, but she always found a way to bring cupcakes to every school fundraiser. We weren't rich, not by a long shot, but our home? It was overflowing with love. Dinner was always hot, arguments always ended in hugs, and birthdays were sacred. My parents sacrificed everything for me. They worked extra shifts to put me through college, skipped vacations so I could pay rent during internships, and when I finally landed my engineering job, they were there, front row at my graduation, crying like I'd just won the lottery. They were my rock, my foundation. Years later, I met Rachel. She was charming, confident, and came from a much wealthier family. The kind of people who had summer homes and talked about wine pairings like it was a competitive sport. But when we first started dating, she seemed so down-to-earth despite her background. She loved that I was grounded, and I loved that she didn't seem to care that I wasn't rich. My parents adored her, too, at first. Mom even baked her a pie the first time they met, and Dad called her kiddo, like she was already part of our family. But things started to change after we got married. It was subtle at first. Rachel insisting we host Christmas at our place because it was more modern than my parents' small home, or suggesting I dress a little better when meeting her parents. I brushed it off. Harmless, right? But over time, those small comments grew sharper, colder. My parents suddenly became a little too old-fashioned, a bit clingy, or not exactly socially polished. Her tone carried this hint of embarrassment, like she wished she could trade my family in for a shinier, newer model. Her parents, especially her mother, Susan, didn't even try to hide their disapproval. From day one, they looked at my family like we were a charity case. I'll never forget our first joint dinner. My dad cracked one of his classic, corny jokes about carburetors, and Susan smiled thinly before asking, "So, Harold, are you still doing cars?" like it was some kind of childish hobby. My mom tried to laugh it off, but I saw the way her hands trembled under the table. It physically hurt me. I tried to keep the peace. I told myself, they just come from a different world. I kept hoping Rachel would defend my parents. Instead, she'd just say, "You know how Mom is. Don't take it personally." But every time she said that, I did take it personally, because it was my family they were belittling. Fast forward 5 years. My parents started struggling with their health. Dad's back problems worsened, and Mom's arthritis made it hard for her to run the bakery anymore. They sold it to a young couple, downsized their home, and told me they'd like to move closer. "Not to bother you, honey," Mom said, "just so we can be near." My heart broke for them, but I loved the idea. I wanted them nearby, so I helped them find a small apartment just 10 minutes from us. Rachel wasn't thrilled, but she pretended to be supportive. "That's sweet," she said. "As long as they respect boundaries." I hated that word, boundaries. My parents were never intrusive. They never showed up unannounced or asked for anything. They just wanted family dinners once in a while, a phone call every few days. Then came my in-laws' grand idea, a huge anniversary party at our house. Apparently, our backyard and open layout made it the perfect venue. I was hesitant, but Rachel insisted. "It's just one night," she said. "My parents will handle everything." And they did more than handle everything. They took over completely. They hired decorators, caterers, even a valet service. For days, my house felt like a rental property. Every time I walked in, someone was rearranging furniture or hauling boxes of champagne. I overheard Susan telling one of the planners, "We'll need to move those old family photos. They don't exactly fit the aesthetic." I wanted to snap, I really did, but Rachel just squeezed my arm and whispered, "Please don't start." So, I didn't. I told myself I could handle one night of pretending. The night of the party, my parents called me around 6 p.m. "We're outside, honey," Mom said. "Do we come around the back?" I frowned. Guests were supposed to use the front. I walked out to greet them, but before I reached the driveway, one of the valets stopped them. He was holding a clipboard, looking confused. "I'm sorry, ma'am, sir, this is a private event." Before I could step in, Susan appeared, wearing her usual fake smile. "Oh, they must be mistaken," she said. "The staff entrance is around back." Staff? She thought my parents were staff. My mom, in her floral dress, holding a small gift bag. My dad, leaning slightly on his cane, smiling even as confusion filled his eyes. I froze. Rachel ran up a few seconds later, her face pale. "Mom," she hissed, "they're his parents." "Oh." Susan laughed lightly, covering her mouth. Goodness, I didn't recognize them in the dark. But she didn't apologize. She just waved her hand and turned away, already back in hostess mode. My parents didn't say much, but I saw how my mom's smile faltered, how my dad's jaw tightened. I ushered them inside. But the moment we crossed the threshold, it was like stepping into another world. Chandeliers, catering tables, people in designer suits. It didn't feel like my house anymore. Every photo of me and my parents had been replaced by Rachel's family portraits. Even the magnets on the fridge were gone. The whole night, my parents sat quietly at a corner table while Susan and her friends toasted to family and success. No one spoke to them except the servers. I tried to sit with them, but Rachel kept pulling me away. "Come say hi to Aunt Denise. Evan, help with the champagne." Every time I looked back, my parents looked smaller, out of place, like guests at a stranger's home. When the night finally ended, I helped them to their car. My dad smiled weakly. "Don't worry, son," he said, "we're just proud of you." I wanted to believe him. I thought that would be the worst of it. I was wrong. A few months later, I got a promotion at work. Higher pay, more responsibility, longer hours. I started getting home late, sometimes after midnight. That's when Rachel's parents began helping out. It started small. Susan dropping by to check on the houseplants, her husband supervising a contractor I'd hired, even borrowing our car for errands. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until one Friday evening when I came home early and found Susan giving a tour of my house to her friends. "Oh, and this is the master suite," she said proudly. We helped them design the space. Such a cozy retreat. Helped them? I confronted Rachel after everyone left, and she brushed it off again. "They're just excited," she said. "Don't make it a big deal." But the truth was, they had slowly, systematically, made themselves at home in my home. I'd find Susan's perfume bottles in the bathroom, her husband's cigar case on the counter, and their mail addressed to my address. I tried to set boundaries, but Rachel said I was overreacting. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late October, freezing and windy. I'd been at work till 10 p.m. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw cars lined up along the street, lights flashing from inside the house, music thumping. Another party. My in-laws were throwing a full-blown event in my home without even telling me. But that wasn't the worst part. As I stepped out of the car, I noticed two figures sitting on the front steps, bundled in coats, shivering. My heart stopped. It was my parents. My mom's eyes were red from crying. My dad's hands were trembling. Dad! I rushed over. What are you doing out here? He looked up slowly, his voice soft and cracked. Son, why won't they let us in? That single question cut deeper than anything I'd ever felt. My throat felt tight, my hands shaking as I helped my parents to their feet. My mother tried to smile, clutching the little box she'd brought. I noticed then that it was the same one she used for her homemade cookies. They must have thought there was another gathering, maybe a family dinner or something I hadn't told them about. I didn't know whether to feel more angry or ashamed. I turned toward the house where laughter spilled out through the windows, and something inside me snapped. I didn't say a word. I just stood there watching the warm light flicker across the glass, knowing that everything that would happen next would change all of our lives forever. Inside, the music was loud enough to rattle the windows. I could hear laughter, clinking glasses, someone shouting about shots. It wasn't the quiet kind of celebration either. It was the expensive kind. The kind that came with catering staff, champagne towers, and people too drunk to notice anything beyond themselves. I walked up to the door and rang the bell. Nothing. I tried again, harder. Finally, a young man, one of the caterers, opened it halfway, squinting. Sorry, sir. Guests are supposed to enter through the back. I live here, I said flatly. He blinked. Oh, I didn't know, Mrs. Cooper said. I didn't wait for him to finish. I pushed the door open, guiding my parents inside. The warmth hit them immediately, but it didn't seem to reach their faces. They looked lost. My mom whispered, "We didn't mean to interrupt anything, honey. We just thought we'd stop by since you said Fridays were usually free." I stared at her, realizing she had probably called ahead. And Rachel had ignored her. As soon as we stepped into the living room, I froze. Susan was standing near the fireplace, drink in hand, wearing a silk dress and pearls. Rachel was beside her, laughing with a group of people from her parents' country club. They looked like the perfect image of wealth and comfort until Rachel noticed me. Her smile faltered for half a second, then snapped back on like a light switch. "Evan, you're home early," she said, a little too loudly. I glanced around. My living room was unrecognizable again. White tablecloths draped over my furniture. Decorations strung across the ceiling, framed photos of her parents on the mantelpiece. There wasn't a trace of me or my family anywhere. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Susan turned toward me, all faux charm. "Oh, we're just hosting a little gathering for the charity board." "I assumed Rachel told you." "She didn't." "Oh, well, you've been so busy lately, dear." I didn't want to bother you with details. Behind me, my mom was looking around quietly like she was trying not to be in the way. My dad gave a polite nod to Susan and her husband, even though his jaw was tight. Susan noticed them then. "Oh, Harold and Linda, I didn't realize you were coming." Her tone carried that same rehearsed sweetness that only made things worse. "We don't exactly have extra seating tonight, but perhaps you could take a spot at the kitchen island." My mom nodded quickly. "Oh, no. We don't want to intrude." Perfect," Susan interrupted, turning back to her friends before my mom could even finish her sentence. "The staff will bring over some appetizers." I clenched my fists. "They're my parents, Susan. Not guests. They can sit wherever they like." Rachel shot me a warning look, her smile still frozen for the audience. "Evan," she whispered through her teeth, "please don't start. We can talk later." I wanted to scream. But my parents, ever patient, tried to smooth it over. My dad placed a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "It's fine, son. We'll just stay for a little bit." They sat on 2 stools near the kitchen counter while waiters walked around serving champagne. No one approached them. No one even looked their way. It was like they didn't exist. The rest of the night passed in a blur of humiliation. Every few minutes, I'd catch Susan glancing at my parents with a mix of pity and annoyance, as if they were out of place in her curated scene. My mother kept smiling through it, but I could tell she was fighting tears. My father barely spoke at all. Then, midway through the evening, I overheard Susan talking to one of her friends, a woman with a diamond bracelet the size of a small planet. "Rachel has done so well for herself," Susan said, clearly proud. "Especially marrying Evan. I mean, considering where he comes from." The friend leaned closer. "Oh, what do you mean?" Susan lowered her voice, but not enough. "His parents are sweet, of course, but well, they're not exactly our circle. It's been an adjustment." That was it. I walked straight over. "An adjustment?" I said. Susan blinked. "Oh, Evan, I didn't see you there. I was just saying how proud we are of you both." I stared at her, then at Rachel. My wife looked mortified, but didn't say a word. Her silence hurt more than Susan's words. That night, after the guests finally left, I asked Rachel point blank, "Do you even like my parents?" She hesitated too long. "Evan, it's not about like or dislike, it's about compatibility. They're very simple people. My parents just have a different way of living. That's all." "Simple?" I repeated, my voice breaking on the word. "They're kind. They're generous. They're the reason I have any of this." Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. "You always make me the villain. You know how hard it is trying to balance both families. My parents just want to help, but you keep taking it as an attack." "Because it is one," I said. She turned away. "You're overreacting. Just let it go." But I couldn't. And things only got worse from there. Over the next few weeks, Susan started dropping by more often. Always unannounced. Always with a reason. Just checking on the houseplants or making sure the cleaning crew came on time. I'd find her rearranging furniture or swapping out decor. Once, I walked in to see her directing movers who were installing a massive dining table she'd ordered for hosting purposes. My old wooden table, the one my parents had given us when we first married, was gone. When I asked Rachel where it went, she said, "Mom had it donated." It didn't really match the style anymore. It felt like a punch to the gut. That table had scratches from my childhood, carvings from the day my dad and I tried to fix it with a screwdriver. Gone. My parents, meanwhile, kept getting more distant. My mom would call saying she didn't want to be a bother. My dad, who used to visit to help me fix things around the house, stopped coming by entirely. Every time they did visit, Susan would find a way to make them uncomfortable. Subtle digs, backhanded compliments, constant mentions of proper etiquette. The final straw came when Rachel's parents decided to host Thanksgiving again at my house. I found out 2 days before the event when Susan called to confirm the caterer. "You'll love it," she said cheerfully. "We're going for a more refined atmosphere this year. No store-bought pies." "My mom was planning to bake," I said. "Oh," Susan replied, her tone dripping with condescension. "Well, she's welcome to bring something if she insists." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. When Thanksgiving came, my parents arrived right on time, carrying homemade dishes, smiling despite everything. But Susan had changed the entire seating arrangement. The family table was set for her relatives and friends. My parents were seated at a small table near the back, like extras in their own son's life. At one point, I noticed my mom's pumpkin pie, the one she was so proud of, sitting untouched on the counter while everyone raved about Susan's caterer's desserts. My dad quietly got up and helped clean dishes halfway through dinner, even though he was technically a guest. That night, after everyone left, I sat on the back porch with my parents. My mom patted my hand and said softly, "It's okay, honey. We're just happy to see you." but I could see the sadness in her eyes. My dad finally said what they both were thinking. "You've worked hard for everything you have, Evan. Don't let anyone make you feel small in your own home." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing I'd let my parents, the people who'd given me everything, be humiliated over and over again. All because I kept choosing silence over confrontation. But then came that cold October night again, the one that would change everything. Because seeing my parents outside my home, shivering while strangers drank inside, wasn't just an accident. It was the final, undeniable proof that this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was deliberate. And I was finally done staying quiet. The next morning, after that humiliating night, my parents didn't call. They always did. Even if it was just to say, "Drive safe to work," or, "Your dad made extra muffins if you want some." That silence, it hit different. It wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. I tried to tell myself they were just tired, but the truth sank in, they'd reached their limit. When I called, my mom's voice was soft, but there was a stiffness I hadn't heard before. "We didn't mean to cause any trouble last night, honey," she said. "Your wife looked busy." "And your in-laws?" "Well, they seem to have their hands full with the house." The house? The way she said it made my stomach twist. My parents didn't even call it my house anymore. I told her they could come by any time, that they never needed an invitation, but she just said maybe after things settled down. That was the first real fracture between us. I didn't realize it then, but my silence that night had cost me more than pride. It had cost me their trust. Rachel acted like nothing happened. She breezed through breakfast humming, dressed for brunch with her mom, and asked casually if I could pick up a new set of dining chairs her mother ordered for us. I didn't respond. I just watched her, wondering how someone could seem so unbothered after what I'd seen. When she finally noticed my silence, she sighed. "Evan, please don't start again." "Again?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. "You think what happened last night is normal?" She rolled her eyes. "My parents didn't mean to leave them outside. It was a misunderstanding. They were freezing, Rachel." "I know, and that's awful, but you're acting like they did it on purpose." I leaned forward. "Did you even invite them?" Her eyes flicked away for a split second. "That's all it took." "I knew you didn't," I said quietly. "Evan, you knew they were coming. My mom calls you every week." You ignored her. She crossed her arms. "Because your parents have no sense of boundaries. They just show up." My mother was planning a formal event, not some casual family dinner. It would have been embarrassing. I just stared at her. "Embarrassing?" Her expression hardened. "You always twist my words." "I'm saying they don't fit in at events like that, and it's not fair to them to feel out of place." "Out of place?" I repeated slowly. "They're my family, Rachel." "Exactly," she said. "Yours. And my parents are mine. Maybe we need to start setting clearer lines before things get worse." That word again. Lines. It was always her way of saying, "Keep your family away." That day, something shifted between us. We spoke less, moved differently. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage where I was the unwanted guest. Over the next few weeks, my parents stopped coming entirely. My mom's calls became shorter, and my dad avoided talking about the house altogether. But the part that really burned came from a neighbor, Mrs. Wells, who lived 2 doors down. She caught me outside one morning and said, "Your parents stopped by the other day, dear. Such nice people. But your mother looked a little upset." "Upset?" I asked, uneasy. "She mentioned something about not wanting to cause tension between you and your wife. Said she dropped off a few things for you, some old keepsakes." My heart sank. I hadn't seen anything. When I got home, I went straight to the garage. Nothing. Then I checked the basement. Empty. When Rachel came home, I asked, "Did my parents leave something here recently?" She froze mid-step. "What kind of something?" "Old boxes, photo albums, my dad's tools, some keepsakes." Her tone shifted immediately. "Oh, those." "Yes, your mom brought a few boxes, but they were falling apart, Evan. Half of it was moldy junk. I told my mom's cleaning service to toss it." I couldn't breathe for a moment. "You what?" "They were old, baby. You don't need that clutter." I walked past her to the garage, checking every corner. Trash bins empty. Everything gone. "Rachel," I said, my voice shaking. "That wasn't clutter. That was my family's history." She sighed impatiently. "You're exaggerating. What did you even need from there?" "Broken tools and yellowed photos." "Photos of my grandfather." I snapped. "My mom's letters. My dad's medals. I stopped, running my hand through my hair, trying not to lose it. "You had no right." "Don't talk to me like that," she said coldly. "It's our home, and I get a say in what stays here." I stared at her, realizing the truth. She didn't see us as partners. She saw everything, me, the house, even my parents, as things she could control. That night, I drove to my parents' apartment. My mom answered the door with a tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. My dad was sitting in his recliner, a TV dinner untouched in front of him. When I told them what happened, my mom's lips trembled. She tried to hide it, but tears slipped out anyway. "It's okay," she whispered. "We shouldn't have left those things with her. It's our fault." "It's not your fault," I said. "It's mine. I should have seen this sooner." My dad finally spoke, his voice low. "Son, you don't owe anyone your silence." Those words stuck with me. When I got home later that night, Rachel was sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone. I didn't say a word. I just walked past her. The next few days were tense. She acted like nothing was wrong, but I noticed the small things. Calls she'd silence when I entered the room. Text notifications from her mother that popped up constantly. I started feeling like a stranger in my own house. Then one afternoon, I came home early. There were voices in the living room. Susan and Rachel mid-conversation. I was about to step in when I heard my name. Susan said, "You've done well managing him so far. You just have to make sure everything stays under your name when the refinance goes through." Rachel replied, "Mom, I told you he'll sign it. He doesn't even look at the paperwork." My blood ran cold. I stepped forward. "What refinance?" They both froze. Susan tried to recover. "Oh, Evan, we were just discussing what refinance?" I repeated. Rachel's face went pale. "It's nothing, just the home equity paperwork. We talked about upgrading the backyard, remember?" "No, we didn't," I said sharply. "And that's not what you just said." Susan gave her daughter a sharp look, then forced a smile. "It's just a standard financial adjustment. Nothing to worry about, dear." I walked over and picked up the papers sitting on the counter. My name was there alongside hers. And beneath it, a second signature line for a joint refinance application listing both Rachel and Susan Cooper as co-owners. My vision blurred. "You put your mother on the mortgage." Rachel tried to speak, but Susan jumped in. "Evan, this is common practice in families with shared investments. We've contributed a great deal to this property after all." "Contributed?" I repeated. "You mean taking over everything I built?" Rachel's voice broke. Evan, please don't make this dramatic. It's just paperwork. Paperwork that removes me from my own house. That silence that followed was unbearable. Rachel's eyes darted between me and her mother, panic rising. Susan, on the other hand, didn't flinch. She just took a sip of her wine, watching me like I was some child throwing a tantrum. Evan, she said calmly, you really should be grateful. We're ensuring this house stays financially stable. You wouldn't want it falling apart, would you? I took a deep breath. Get out. Susan blinked. Excuse me? I said, get out of my house. Rachel stepped forward. Evan, now. I said louder this time. Susan scoffed. You're being ridiculous. You can't just, but I didn't hear the rest. I walked to the door, opened it, and pointed outside. Leave. She stared at me for a moment, then turned to Rachel. You see what I mean? This is what happens when you marry beneath you. Rachel didn't follow her out. She just stood there, frozen, torn between me and the woman who'd raised her. That night, she packed a small bag and left to stay with her parents for a few days. I didn't stop her. I needed silence more than I needed answers. But what I didn't know was that while I was at work the next day, she came back with her parents and emptied half the house. Furniture, decor, electronics, even the framed photos that I had taken. When I walked in, it was like someone had hollowed my life out. There was a note on the counter, I'm sorry you can't see what's best for us. I'll come back when you've calmed down. I sank into the one remaining chair in the living room, surrounded by emptiness. And for the first time in my life, I felt something inside me shift from heartbreak to clarity. Because that's when I realized something my father once told me, some people don't want a partner, they want a property. And I was done being owned. The first few days after Rachel left were eerily quiet. I'd walk into a room and feel the emptiness like it had weight. The house echoed. Every step sounded too loud. Every clock ticked too slowly. I'd reach for things that weren't there anymore. The remote, the photo of my parents on my desk, the small ceramic owl my mom had made me in college that used to sit by the TV. Gone. She'd taken even the smallest traces of my family, as if erasing them would make the house hers completely. I tried not to think about it, but every time I turned on the lights and saw bare walls, I couldn't help but imagine Rachel's face when she left. Calm, detached, maybe even proud. She'd walked out like someone who'd just crossed something off her to-do list. For the first time in years, I didn't have anyone telling me what I should say, how I should act, or when my parents were too much. But it didn't feel like freedom yet. It felt like standing in the wreckage of a life I didn't recognize. That week, I threw myself into work. I'd stay late, volunteer for projects, anything to avoid going home, but it caught up to me. One night around 11 p.m., I sat at my desk and realized I hadn't eaten all day. My hands were shaking. My reflection in the office window looked older somehow, like I'd aged 10 years in a week. When I finally drove home, there was an envelope taped to my front door. My stomach sank before I even opened it. It was a notice, a request for verification of property ownership. My name was still listed, but it mentioned secondary interest held by Susan Cooper. My chest went cold. She'd actually gone through with it. I called my bank the next morning, trying to stay calm. The woman on the line said, it appears there was an attempt to modify the mortgage, but it was flagged because of mismatched authorization. Attempt? I asked. Yes, Mr. Hill, she said. Someone submitted paperwork with your digital signature, but it didn't pass verification. We've frozen any changes pending your confirmation. That word, frozen, might have been the only thing keeping me together that day. I asked who filed it, but she couldn't disclose details beyond a co-applicant. I didn't need her to say it. I already knew. Rachel. That night, I sat in the middle of the empty living room and stared at the walls, thinking about how my life had gone from quiet family dinners to forged documents and fake smiles. Somewhere in between being a husband and a son, I'd lost myself completely. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my dad. "Heard you've had a rough week. Mom made soup. Come by tomorrow." I hadn't told them everything yet. I didn't know how. I'd already let them down once. But the next day, I went anyway. Their apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms and a tiny balcony that overlooked the parking lot, but it felt warmer than my house ever did. My mom opened the door before I could knock twice. She smiled when she saw me, but I could tell she knew. Moms always do. She didn't ask questions right away. She just handed me a bowl of soup and said, "Eat first." My dad sat across from me, watching quietly. After a few minutes, he finally said, "You don't look like you've been sleeping." "I haven't," I admitted. "They tried to take the house." He didn't react right away. He just nodded slowly like he'd been expecting it. "People like them don't stop until they own everything they touch," he said. "But they don't know what it's like to earn what they have. That's their weakness." Mom reached across the table and took my hand. "You don't have to fight them, honey. You just have to outlast them." I wanted to believe that. But the more I thought about what Rachel and her parents had done, the lies, the humiliation, the way they'd used me, the more something dark and steady began to form inside me. Not rage exactly, more like clarity. When I left their apartment that night, my dad followed me to the parking lot. Before I got into the car, he said, "Evan, do you remember what I told you when you got your first job?" I smiled faintly. "You said, never let anyone make you feel like you owe them your success." He nodded. "Good. Now it's time to remember that." That was the first night I started thinking differently. I didn't rush to fix things. I didn't call Rachel or send angry messages. Instead, I started paying attention. I went through every email, every document I'd ever signed. I realized how many times I'd let her handle the details. She'd changed utilities, updated insurance, even listed her mother's contact on my homeowner's policy for emergencies. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was a pattern. I called a lawyer, an old friend from college named Marcus. He wasn't a divorce attorney by trade. He specialized in real estate, but he agreed to take a look at the paperwork. After an hour of reviewing, he looked up and said, "Evan, this isn't just a refinance attempt. They've been setting this up for months." He showed me small details I'd missed, requests for joint access to financial records, power of attorney forms disguised as co-signing permissions, and an email thread between Rachel and the mortgage agent about transferring liability to simplify future estate management. In plain English, it meant they were trying to make me a guest in my own life. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "The good news is nothing's finalized. The bad news is they've already leveraged her home equity as part of another investment proposal under her parents' LLC." I blinked. "They used my house as collateral?" He nodded. "It's not binding yet, but it's close." That was the moment everything inside me went still. No more confusion. No more trying to make sense of it. Just a simple, cold realization. They weren't just manipulative. They were thieves. That night, I couldn't sleep again, but for a different reason. My mind was racing, not with pain this time, but with purpose. I started gathering everything. Bank statements, messages, legal documents. I backed up files, printed records, and moved valuables from the house into a storage unit under my name only. It felt strange, like preparing for a storm I'd known was coming for years, but never faced. A few days later, Rachel texted, "Can we talk? I think we both need to calm down." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "Sure, come by tomorrow." She showed up right on time, dressed perfectly as always, her perfume filling the air before she even stepped inside. She looked around, frowning slightly at the empty spaces. "It feels different in here," she said. "It is," I replied. We sat in silence for a minute, then she started with the same tone she always used when she wanted to sound reasonable. "I know things have been tense. My parents were just trying to help. They didn't mean to overstep." "Help?" I asked, my voice firm. "Rachel, they tried to put your mother on my mortgage." She sighed. "You're exaggerating again. It was just about simplifying ownership." "Ownership of what? My life?" Her jaw tightened. "You always twist everything I say. This is exactly why my parents think what?" I cut in. "That I'm not good enough for you? That I should be grateful they let me exist in my own home?" She went quiet. I think part of her expected me to yell or plead like before, but I didn't. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't even recognize anymore. After a long silence, she stood. "I'll stay at my parents' for a while. We both need space." "For once," I said quietly, "I agree." When she left, I locked the door behind her and stood there for a long time. It didn't feel like the end of a marriage. It felt like walking out of a cage I hadn't realized I was in. The next few weeks were hard. I wasn't used to living alone. I'd wake up expecting to hear her footsteps, then remember she wasn't there. I'd reach for my phone to text her about something small, only to stop halfway. But every time I missed her, I reminded myself of that image, my parents outside shivering while she laughed inside. It was like a compass keeping me pointed in the right direction. I started spending more time with my parents again. I helped my mom bake for the holidays, fixed a leaky pipe in their kitchen, took my dad to his doctor appointments. It was simple, quiet, real. And slowly, that numbness started to fade. But I wasn't done yet. Because while Rachel and her parents thought they'd taken control of everything, I was quietly taking it back. One document, one signature, one calculated move at a time. And when the time came to show them exactly what I'd learned from watching their games, they'd never see it coming. The weeks that followed felt like breathing fresh air after years of inhaling smoke. The silence that used to feel suffocating became comforting. I started hearing things again, birds in the morning, rain against the windows, the sound of my own footsteps on the hardwood floors. I didn't realize how much noise Rachel's family brought into my life until it was gone. Every room used to echo with their constant judgment, the subtle sighs, the fake compliments, the whispered comments when my parents visited. Now, it was just quiet, peaceful. I decided to take back control, but not the way I used to, through arguments or trying to prove myself. That never worked. This time, I focused on rebuilding silently, methodically, and fully on my own terms. First, I called Marcus, my lawyer friend. "I want to lock down everything under my name. No joint access, no open authorizations," I told him. He helped me close joint accounts, cancel co-signed cards, and transfer all property titles into verified protection under a trust that only I could access. We spent hours digging through every document, every clause Rachel's parents had inserted. By the time we were done, there wasn't a single loose thread left for them to pull. Marcus smirked when he finished reviewing the last file. "You're bulletproof now," he said. "They can't touch a cent without committing fraud." "Good," I said quietly. "Then let's make sure if they try, they regret it." At work, things started turning around, too. I'd been so distracted during the chaos that I hadn't noticed how much I'd neglected my projects. But once the noise was gone, I threw myself into them again. My company was launching a major infrastructure upgrade, and I volunteered to lead the design team. It was a challenge. Endless nights, tight deadlines. But it gave me something I hadn't felt in months: purpose. My boss noticed. 3 weeks later, he called me into his office. "Evan," he said, You've been killing it lately. We've got an opening for a senior engineering lead position. I want you to take it. I blinked. I hesitated. That's a big jump. He smiled. So, make the jump. That promotion changed everything. The raise was significant, but it wasn't about the money. It was the validation. After being constantly undermined, I finally felt capable again. Like the version of myself I used to be before marriage. The one who dreamed big and believed in earning every inch of progress. I didn't tell Rachel. I didn't post about it. I just worked quietly. Let the results speak. My parents, though, noticed right away. When I told them the news, my mom teared up. I knew you'd find your way, sweetheart, she said. My dad smiled. That slow, proud kind of smile that says everything without words. See, he said, you build things. That's what you do. You don't need anyone's permission. I started spending more time with them again. Saturday breakfast at their apartment became routine. Pancakes, coffee, and quiet laughter. My dad's health was improving, too. I started helping him get back into small mechanical projects, the kind that made him light up. One weekend, we rebuilt an old lawnmower engine just for fun. Mom filmed us with her phone, giggling every time we argued over which wrench was the right size. Those moments reminded me what real family looked like. Then, almost 2 months after Rachel left, I got an email from her. The subject line was short, "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. I've been thinking a lot about us. I know things got out of hand. My parents were only trying to protect me, and I didn't realize how much that hurt you. Can we meet for dinner just to talk? I miss you. I didn't reply right away. I forwarded the message to Marcus. He called 5 minutes later. Be careful, he said. This smells like a setup. If they couldn't get your property, they might be trying to play sympathy next. He was right. Still, I agreed to meet. Not because I wanted her back, but because I needed to see her face when she realized I wasn't the same man she left behind. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. She arrived late, of course, in a designer coat and heels that probably cost more than my car payment. When she saw me, she smiled like nothing had ever happened. You look good, she said, sitting down. Work must be going well. It is, I replied evenly. She played with her wine glass. I've been thinking maybe we just need to reset. I know my parents went too far. They were trying to protect me, but I told them I need to make my own choices. Is that what this is? I asked. Your choice? Her smile faltered. I still love you, Evan. And I don't want to throw everything away over misunderstandings. I leaned back. A misunderstanding is forgetting a dinner reservation, Rachel. Not trying to steal someone's house. She looked away, biting her lip. It wasn't like that. I didn't argue. Instead, I slid a folder across the table, copies of the refinance papers, the forged signatures, and the LLC proposal linking her parents to the property. Her face drained of color. You really shouldn't have underestimated me, I said quietly. I know everything you and your parents tried to do, and I made sure none of it can touch me again. She looked panicked now. Evan, you don't understand. It was their idea. No, I interrupted. You signed your name. You made it yours. Her eyes filled with tears. I just wanted security. Security doesn't come from control, I said. It comes from trust. And you killed that the night my parents froze outside while your family partied in my living room. She didn't have an answer. She just sat there, silent, like the weight of what she'd done was finally starting to sink in. When I stood to leave, she whispered, "So that's it?" I paused. "No, Rachel. That's just the beginning." Because while she thought she was walking into a reunion, I'd already spoken to Marcus about something bigger, something that would change the balance of power completely. See, when her parents tried to use my property as collateral, they listed their LLC under the same registration number they used for other investments. Marcus traced it. That LLC had several unresolved violations and a pending investigation for misuse of funds in another state. By attaching my house to their assets, they'd accidentally linked themselves to my mortgage application on record. It meant their investment umbrella now had my name connected to it. And legally, that gave me the right to request an audit. Marcus grinned when I told him. "You realize what this means, right? You can make their entire business unravel just by shining a light on it." I didn't react right away. I wasn't sure if I wanted revenge yet, but I knew I wanted accountability, so I waited. I let them think I was finished. Rachel stopped messaging after that night, though I occasionally saw her parents' car drive past the neighborhood, probably checking if I'd moved out. I didn't. Instead, I fixed the house, repaired the fence her father claimed was an eyesore, repainted the kitchen walls, brought back my old furniture from storage. Then, one Saturday morning, my parents came over for breakfast. My mom brought a fresh batch of her cinnamon rolls, and my dad walked around the house quietly, nodding approvingly. He turned to me and said, "Looks like a home again." That meant more than any apology could have. By winter, life felt different, simpler, better. My promotion became official, and my team started winning recognition for our projects. I took my parents on a small vacation, just a few days by the coast. Nothing fancy, but it was the first trip we'd taken together in years. On the last night there, as we sat watching the sunset, my dad said something I'll never forget. "You know, son, people think strength means standing your ground, but sometimes it's knowing when to rebuild from scratch." He was right. I wasn't the same person who once begged for peace in his own home. I'd learned that sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's strategy. When we returned, Marcus called with an update. "The Coopers LLC is under review," he said. "The audit you triggered unearthed some interesting things. Fraudulent transfers, tax evasion, the works." I didn't smile. I just exhaled slowly. Let it play out, because for the first time, I wasn't chasing revenge. I was watching justice unfold naturally, quietly, perfectly. And deep down, I knew this was only the start. It was strange how quiet revenge felt. No shouting, no grand gestures, just cold, calculated precision. I didn't even think of it as revenge at first. It was just balance. The kind the world eventually finds when people push too far for too long. After Marcus confirmed the audit was moving forward, I stayed patient. The Coopers were wealthy, connected, and arrogant enough to believe the rules didn't apply to them. That kind of confidence made them sloppy. They didn't realize how deep Marcus had gone into their records or how much evidence he'd already secured. Their financial empire was like a mansion built on a swamp. Looked solid from the outside, but one good storm could sink it. And that storm was forming quietly right under them. Over the next few months, I became someone entirely new, someone who didn't just survive chaos, but learned to use it. My work life flourished. The infrastructure project I led ended up being a huge success, earning national attention. My name started showing up in tech journals. And one day, I got an email from a major firm offering me a position as director of systems engineering, nearly double my salary. I accepted. And here's the thing, the new company wasn't just bigger. It had partnerships with several investors, one of which, ironically, happened to overlap with the Cooper network. Through those connections, I learned something that made everything click. Susan and her husband weren't just running that family business of theirs. They were quietly funneling money through shell entities, hiding assets from taxation, and manipulating ownership claims on several properties, including mine. That was when I realized I didn't just want to win back my peace. I wanted to make sure they could never do to anyone else what they'd done to me. So, I started gathering everything. Not like before, when I was just documenting what they'd done to me personally. Now, I was pulling corporate filings, financial transfers, shell company registrations, emails that Marcus obtained through legal discovery. I had dates, names, and signatures that connected Susan's LLCs to tax-dodging schemes that would make any auditor's jaw drop. Marcus looked through the folder one night and let out a low whistle. "Evan, this isn't just petty fraud. This is federal-level stuff." I nodded. "Good. Then it deserves a federal audience." "Do you want to go public with it?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want them to see it before everyone else does." We set a timeline. Once the audit results came in, it would trigger an automatic review by the state's financial bureau. That alone could freeze their assets temporarily, but I wanted to add a personal touch before that happened. So, I waited for the perfect opportunity. It came on an early spring weekend when Rachel called unexpectedly. Her voice was careful, cautious, like someone walking barefoot on glass. "I heard about your new job," she said. "Congratulations." "Thanks," I replied simply. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. There was silence on the line. Then she added, "My parents have been under a lot of stress lately." "Some kind of audit?" "I think it's gotten serious." I kept my tone neutral. "That's so?" "Yes, they're saying it's political. You know how that goes." I didn't respond. She hesitated, then said, "Would you mind if I stopped by to talk?" "It's not about us, I promise. I just don't know who else to turn to." I agreed. When she showed up, she looked nothing like the Rachel I used to know. The perfect hair, the designer bag, the polished confidence, gone. She looked tired, nervous. She sat on the couch, clutching her purse. "They're panicking," she said. "Their accounts are being reviewed, and the business lawyer is saying they might lose everything. Mom keeps insisting it's a misunderstanding, but I've never seen her this scared." I listened quietly. Then she looked up at me, her eyes searching. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I didn't answer. Her lips trembled slightly. "Evan, did you do this?" I leaned back, meeting her gaze. "Rachel, your parents built their empire on lies. All I did was shine a light on it." She stared at me, shocked. "You could have gone to jail with them. Your name was on some of those filings." "Not anymore," I said calmly. "That's the difference between me and them. I fix my mistakes before they destroy me." She looked down, voice breaking. "They don't know what to do. They're selling their cars, their vacation homes, everything. Mom said she might have to file bankruptcy if the audit expands." I didn't say it out loud, but in my mind, I thought, good. After a moment, she whispered, "You really meant it that night, didn't you? When you said it was just the beginning." I nodded once. "You made sure my parents felt small in front of your family. Now your family knows what it feels like." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I never wanted it to go this far." "Neither did I," said quietly. "But sometimes people don't learn until they lose something real." She left soon after. And I knew she'd run straight back to tell them what I'd said. I wanted her to, because that same week, the audit report was finalized, and Marcus filed a formal complaint attaching every piece of evidence we'd collected. It triggered a full investigation. Within a month, news broke. Local real estate investors under investigation for financial fraud. It wasn't a front-page scandal, but it was big enough to make their world implode. Their accounts were frozen, several properties seized, and their reputation, their precious, spotless reputation, was gone. Susan Cooper went from hosting galas to being photographed leaving a courthouse with reporters asking, "Mrs. Cooper, care to comment on the investigation?" I saw the footage once. She looked smaller, fragile, the same way my mother had looked that night outside my house, clutching a cookie box in the cold. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel guilt either. I just felt balance. Then came the unexpected twist. One of the seized assets under their LLC was a property they'd bought using collateral from my house. When the investigation unraveled the transactions, the ownership of that property reverted to me. It wasn't worth millions, just a modest lakeside house. But it was poetic justice. The very thing they tried to steal from me ended up giving me something better. When I went to see it, I stood on the porch overlooking the water. The breeze was cold but clean. It wasn't fancy. The floors creaked, the paint peeled, but it was mine. Completely mine. That night, I called my parents. "I want you to see something," I said. They came the next morning, bundled in coats. My dad stepped onto the porch and whistled. "Well, would you look at that?" he said. "You've got a lake now." My mom laughed softly. "Are we allowed in this one?" I smiled. "You're the only ones who are." We spent the day cleaning, fixing things, making it livable. It wasn't about the property. It was about reclaiming what mattered. Family, dignity, peace. As the sun set, I stood by the dock with my dad. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You didn't just get even, son. You got free." He was right. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need them to understand. Their empire was collapsing. And I had something better. A quiet, steady life built on truth. But as I watched the lake that evening, I knew one thing for sure. The Coopers weren't done yet. People like them never accept defeat easily. And when they came knocking again, desperate and broken, I'd be ready. It didn't take long for them to come crawling back. About a month after the investigation went public, I got a knock on my door one quiet Sunday afternoon at the lake house. I was sanding the porch railings when I heard it. 3 slow knocks, hesitant but deliberate. When I opened the door, I wasn't surprised to see them standing there. Susan, her husband Martin, and Rachel. They looked nothing like the polished, untouchable family I used to know. Martin's once perfect hair was gray and thin, his tailored coat replaced with something wrinkled and ordinary. Susan's eyes were red and swollen, her posture still proud, but trembling slightly, as if even standing upright took effort. Rachel lingered behind them, hands clasped, her expression unreadable. I didn't say a word. I just stepped aside, letting the cold air fill the silence. Susan was the first to speak. "Evan," she said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. We came to apologize." Her words hung in the air like dust. "I imagine you did," I said evenly, wiping sawdust off my hands. She swallowed hard. "We've lost everything. The house, the business, all of it. We're being audited by multiple agencies. They froze our assets, seized accounts we've had for decades. Martin's name is being dragged through the papers." Martin looked at the ground. "We can't even pay our lawyers anymore," he muttered. For a brief moment, I almost pitied them. Almost. Then I remembered the night my parents stood outside in the freezing wind, their hands shaking as they waited to be let in. I remembered my mother's cracked voice asking, "Why won't they let us in?" That memory hardened whatever sympathy I might have had. Susan took a step closer. "We were wrong about you," she said. We thought we were helping our daughter secure her future, but we destroyed it instead." Rachel finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Evan, I didn't know it would go this far. I never meant for any of this to happen." I met her eyes. "You meant every word the night you called my parents embarrassing. You meant it when you ignored my mom's calls. You meant it when you tried to put your mother's name on my house. Everything after that was just consequence." Her eyes filled with tears. I was stupid. I thought you'd always forgive me. I did, I said quietly, until I realized forgiveness doesn't fix people who aren't sorry. Susan wiped her face. Please, she said, we need help. The lawyers said if we can't settle, we could lose everything, even the retirement fund. You have connections now. You could speak to someone. Get them too. Stop, I asked. She nodded desperately. You could save us. I stared at her for a long moment. The woman who once smirked at my father's calloused hands was now begging, with her manicured fingers trembling. I thought of my parents, their warmth, their humility, their quiet strength, and how this woman had made them feel small for simply being kind. I took a deep breath. You know, I said slowly, my dad used to fix cars for free when people couldn't afford it. He'd say, everyone deserves to get where they're going. I always thought that meant helping people no matter what. But now I realized something he never had to say out loud. They watched me, waiting. I continued, you can't help people who keep slashing their own tires. Susan's expression broke. Evan, please. I held up a hand. No. You had every chance. You mocked my parents, manipulated me, tried to take everything I built, and now that it's gone? You want the same people you crushed to pull you back up? Rachel whispered. So, that's it. I nodded. That's it. Martin finally looked up, anger flashing for the first time. You'll regret this, he said bitterly. You think you're better than us? You just got lucky. I stepped closer, calm, but firm. No, Martin. I got smart. There's a difference. He looked like he wanted to say more, but Susan grabbed his arm. Let's go, she said softly. They turned and started down the steps. Rachel hesitated, glancing back at me one last time. Her voice cracked as she said, I hope you find peace, Evan. I already did, I said, and I closed the door. I stood there for a long while after they left, listening to the wind move through the trees. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was release. The kind that comes when a weight you've carried for years finally falls away. That night, I sat outside on the porch, the lake still and quiet under the fading sunset. My parents came by later with dinner. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, my mom's famous apple pie. My dad leaned on the railing beside me, watching the water ripple. He said, Your mom told me they came by. They did, I replied. You say what you needed to say? Yeah, I said softly. And for once, I didn't say it angry. He smiled faintly. That's how you know it's over. Mom came out carrying plates and said, You boys better eat before it gets cold. We sat there together, eating in comfortable silence, the way we used to. No drama, no noise, no pretending. Just peace. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, I looked at my parents, at the people who'd been humiliated, disrespected, and yet somehow never let bitterness touch them. And I realized something. They hadn't just raised me to be kind. They'd raised me to understand what real strength looked like. Quiet, patient, and unstoppable when tested. When they finally left that evening, my dad paused by his car and said, You know, son, I think your grandpa would have been proud. Why is that? I asked. He grinned. Because you didn't just rebuild what they tried to break. You made it better. After they drove off, I stood on the porch one last time, staring out at the reflection of the moon on the lake. The house behind me was small, simple, and entirely mine. And as the night air settled, I whispered to myself, not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of gratitude, here's to finally letting the right people in. What do you guys think? Have you ever faced people like this, who just tried to take over your life or make you feel small in your own home? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below.